This is Brian from Bringing Down Security. Mr. Betcher's out this week for vacation, and I just wanted to get a quick hello and how are you doing in before we start part 2 of Phil Beyer's interview. Last week, before we cut off, he was talking about risk registers and how those are used in the process of creating an information security program. So that's what we're going to start at right now. We're going to go back to him answering what a risk register is, and we end up with some Q&A about where certain positions should exist in a corporation. So have a great week, and we'll be back full strength. Me and Mr. Betcher will be back in the studio again next week. All right, have a good one. Later.
So a risk register, for lack of a better description, is a list of the risks in your organization, pure and simple. Described or analyzed in whatever way works best for your organization, but ultimately it is a text file, hopefully encrypted, an Excel spreadsheet, it's software, maybe it's GRC, risk management type software, but it's something that lists your risks, identifies the kind of scope in your environment of how it applies, specifically some sort of level or estimation of impact, and hopefully some sort of treatment plan that you decided upon, right? Or ultimately these things still need a treatment plan, so let's figure it out. How are we going to either mitigate or accept or something? Re-review in 6 months or a year or something. So the risk register, I think, is the oft avoided or missed or lacking piece of a strong risk management. It's not lacking from a strong risk management program, but that's what takes a simple or weak security risk management program to a strong program. The consistent treatment of risks. The known knowledge that we have these risks in our environment, these are the ones that were accepted, and we have new leadership today, so I really should revisit all of these things with that new leadership to re-examine, is this, the risk tolerance has changed. Once we get a new leader, whether it's a new CEO, a new, new board, or we go from not public to public, or something like that, right? There's some sort of change. The risk tolerance for our organization has now changed, absolutely. We need to effectively recalculate what that looks like. So,
well, you might also change your risk tolerance based on, or your risk register based on what's going on in the industry. So if you're a payment card industry and say, or you're a retailer like Walmart, and you just realize that one of your biggest competitors was hacked, you might figure out, well, maybe we need to change something that was a low to it's now a high, or well, okay, now what we thought was a high is not necessarily a high. You may have to, understand you might have to understand the weather in your own industry to affect. You might do that periodically just because.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're actually, and I do want to address the examples question, Brian, in a second, but I think you're absolutely right, other Brian. That's not at all confusing, by the way, for those listening in the audience. I think you're absolutely right that and again, I might be being a little simplistic here, or hopefully not at all insulting to people, but a new security program, a relatively immature risk management program, has to make these kinds of adjustments. A mature or strong risk management program will include these kinds of buzzwords like threat intelligence and blah, 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 to be constantly doing what you're describing, Brian, constantly doing this reassessment for impact or other kinds of risk analysis to determine, wait a minute, yesterday this thing was a big deal, now it's a catastrophic, really, really big deal. Let's take care of it now, right? Because some information changed. Absolutely. But those kinds of programs very likely have a risk register of some sort and are already well down this road. I think what's much more likely is the fact that a program exists right now, again, maybe a newly minted program, maybe a new leader who's come in to take the CISO role or something and realize, ooh, we're missing some of these core competencies. We're missing some of these basic fundamental components in our program. Let's get started off on the right foot here. Let's build that risk register. Let's compile our risks and make sure we have it all in the one place. And again, we're all security professionals. We should protect that kind of stuff with our lives, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, lacking that big picture view totally destroys the earlier ability for us to build that strategy, to cast that vision, and move in a direction, right? I mean, clearly, these are not done in order, so to speak. They may be communicated in order, but they're not done in order. Mike Rothman in Pragmatic CSO talks about at a very early stage of a new CSO, and again, a newly minted leader, getting that lay of the land. And one of the key ways of getting a lay of land is a penetration test and/or risk assessment, right? Where does my organization really stand in terms of security controls? Where do I stand in terms of risks? So, if you're walking in the door and you're using me as your resource, which I hope I feel for you. Hopefully, you have plenty of other resources in your newly minted leadership position. But then absolutely identifying the risks in your environment is the first thing you do. And describing your environment or describing your security program via this method, via these core competencies, would be a kind of follow-up in 6 months or 12 months or whatever. Hey, Bob, here, Bob CEO, here is what our security program looks like. It's taken me 12 months to build. It's taken me 18 months to build. But here's what it looks like. Here's how we describe it. Here's how we work with it. So,
Sure.
Now, examples. Okay, so what was your question earlier?
What would go on your risk registry, right? So, I don't know. Hey, you don't have any. Your API is open to, or your cloud is open to the internet right now.
Okay. So let's talk through some examples
like that, or
so it could be, but let's talk through both. Actual examples and then examples of what not to have. Right. So let's start with examples of what not to have in a risk register. All the vulnerabilities from your vulnerability scan. Right, that's not okay. That's not on your risk. Just to be clear, I mean, you guys are nodding your heads because you're smart folks, and I'm sure the people listening, most of them are nodding their heads. But it bears repeating from time to time for the sake of posterity that no, your vulnerabilities that you've detected with Nessus or Nexpose or whatever you're using to scan your environment are not on your risk register. But maybe a single line or a few lines of look,
system hardening.
Yeah, the risk is that we have production systems with critical vulnerabilities that have customer data on them, right? That is a legitimate risk, right? Mm-hmm. And you might further describe in various. I think you might then also go back to on your risk register to determine ultimately, maybe in revision 2 of your risk register, you might refine some of these scenarios because. Depending on the risk analysis technique you are using to determine impact, the scenario has everything to do with it. So if you're doing high, medium, low, NIST 830 type things, then the kind of scenario I just described, you could work out. You could work out a high, medium, low from that, from what I just described, depending on how many servers you have and what your general exposure is, and what kind of threats are generally probing your environment, blah blah blah. If you were using a risk analysis method like FAIR, the factor analysis of information risk, you would need a more detailed scenario. You would need something to the effect of, we have production servers with critical vulnerabilities that take
moderately skilled.
Moderately skilled or a script kiddie level attacker, hours to break through, right? And we have customer data of this type on it, right? Like hundreds of thousands of credit card numbers, right? Okay, so that now is a fairly detailed scenario that could be analyzed with the FAIR method, and then come up with some quantitative estimation of estimated annual loss expectancy. So it just depends on what you're trying to do, but ultimately that risk register is where it begins and ends. It begins with that risk scenario description. And it ends with some sort of impact analysis on the risk, which then gives you ordering and ranking and everything else, prioritization.
And it doesn't have to be that specific either. It can be generic. Like when you're, when I was a consultant, we broke it down into pretty much 3 things. There were technological, there were environmental, Like if you're doing a DR or your business continuity plan, your risk assessment might talk about what happens if your AC goes down, or what happens if your primary data center goes down. What are the chances of there being a forest fire that takes you out, or a tornado, or some kind of natural disaster? And then, we had human elements like, hackers or the disgruntled or gruntled employee. I don't know, however they want to discuss that one. So you can go as specific or as broad as you want to on your risk assessment, but it does definitely have to cover your security requirements. If you're wanting to safeguard your data, you have to have all of those things in flight.
Absolutely. So that risk management component, that core competency of your program, becomes your approach to continually identifying, assessing, and treating risks. And
that's right.
That's a very succinct way to say it, but it includes a lot of those core functions of what we tend to think of as security risk professionals, of what we tend to think of as part of a security program. So that's one of those. Other than framework, risk management is that really core piece of what our programs are doing. The final component or core competency we referred to already in the strategic discussion is the fact that we do need to do measurement and metrics on what's going on in our program. Effectively, if we can't report on it, if we can't measure it and deliver some sort of analysis to say how have we performed, then effectively we're not doing it, right? We may say we're doing it, we may have people that are spinning their wheels and doing stuff, but if we're not reporting on it to some sort of supervisor or executive team that is then taking that data and making some sort of actionable decision on it, right? Not just looking at some charts, but making some sort of decision of, Brian, you're doing the right thing. I want you to keep heading this direction. I like the vision you've laid out. Or conversely, Brian, I really don't like how your team has performed. You really need to be doing in this. You really need to be over here in this area. Here's more money I'm going to give you. Or maybe even worse, I don't like how you performed. I'm not giving you more money. You're failing. Time to fill out that resume and look for the next role, right? So because there's no way to improve there. At least not the way I lined it out or described it. So anyway, I am no wizard here in this measurement and metrics area. There are many other people who are highly skilled in communicating the value of this and how to really do it well. So look to other resources for that. But figuring out a way to regularly report the effectiveness of your program is absolutely critical to the success of your program. And to be perfectly honest, if I might say so, your own professional success. Whether you're a member of the team, the leader of the team, or looking to join a team, right? I mean, a great question during an interview is, how do you measure your team's success? And if you don't get a response that you're happy with, that's probably not a team you want to be a part of.
Yeah, your metrics. If you're starting a information security program and you don't have metrics, there's no way to improve your program in the future. You're just basically dealing with it from year to year. You don't want to have to start over it, re-implementing and everything. So having your metrics and having, being able to say, okay, yeah, we've stopped 60% of our attacks because we employed X. We should probably work on some part that we didn't do so well in, so that would it's all part of an improvement plan. So that, improvement of your information security plan is definitely key.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, lacking any other questions or what have you, those are the 5 core competencies of a security program, as I see it. Governance organization is component 1 or competency 1. Strategy is 2. Framework 3. Risk management 4, and measurement and metrics 5. That's how I see it. Now, there are other kinds of things buried beneath all of those, right? Mm-hmm. So the operational pieces of your program are spread throughout risk management and the framework kind of areas, even strategic decisions. So kind of how do you do day-to-day operations in your security program is spread throughout there. How you work with third parties and do other kinds of risk management is buried in there as well. But all of these are, the way that I tend to think of it is, if I had an auditor walking in the door tomorrow and I magically was able to prepare everything for that person and was able to plop a binder down on the desk as soon as they walked in the door, these are my five. This is my table of contents: governance, organization, strategy, framework, risk management, measurement, and metrics. That's my table of contents.
Cool. So I have a question going back to organization. You mentioned a CISO coming into an organization. If you were a CISO coming into an organization, where would you expect to be reporting to? Would you want to be reporting directly to the CEO, like a little dotted line, and still report directly to like a CSO? How would you want to see a CISO or your chief security officer reporting in the organization?
Sure. So that's a very timely question with the whole target thing happening.
Yes. Yes.
New target CISO reports to the CIO, right? Is the way I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So I might say I might agree with other folks that I've heard treat this question that it highly depends on the organization and it depends on your supervisor as to how successful. And I'll answer it specifically as to how successful you'll be in the near term. Right. So if the CIO is really agreeable with security, then fantastic, you're in business, right? If the CFO loves to spend money on reducing risk and doesn't really want to spend as much money on new IT gadgets, then you're probably okay too. Here's how I'll throw a curveball in that answer though, because the question I would ask right back to me is, well, great, Phil, that's good today, but what happens when the CIO moves on? Maybe not for a bad reason, taking a new position, and you get a new CIO tomorrow. Well, how does that person, deal with or treat risk? How does that person consider security? Same with a new CFO. Same with the new legal counsel, or whatever. And the same thing goes to matter who you report to. So I think that one key aspect of this is not just the reporting structure, but how risk, information risk in particular, is treated or dealt with in the organization. If it's a single reporting structure, a single person that you're exposed to, it's always going to be a problem, potentially, in the far term. Because, you get a new general counsel, you get a new CEO, you get whoever you report to, it doesn't matter. There's a new person in the seat who deals with it differently. If instead the approach is always, wherever you are, to build up this sorry to use another buzzword, but cross-functional team to review enterprise risk and consider as a committee what that means to the organization, I think you'll always be better off. Because no matter which of those hands change, which of those roles change hands, security, quote unquote, has a seat at the table. If there's in fact a charter for an enterprise risk committee, and there is in fact a strong, consistent approach, mature approach to treating enterprise risk, then security will be considered. And again, depending on the members of that committee, you may or may not be respected or may not be heard completely or fully, but you've at least got a chance to make your case. Now, I will answer the question that right now in the reporting structure where I'm in now, I report through legal counsel, through general counsel. That's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I enjoy being in a legal department. I think while not everybody on the team gets the whole technical piece, that's not their job. Their job is to get the risk piece, risk reduction, and they get that. They get that really, really well. So that's kind of neat. And it's a new experience for me, and I'm enjoying it. Previously, I've reported through in the same organization multiple different CIOs, and that was again part of the problem, right? CIO 1, then CIO 2, and then CIO 3 in the same number of years. Made it kind of tough. I feel like I'm fighting. I'm Sisyphus, right? Going uphill, and then the ball rolls back down, and I push it right back up. So, yeah.
So how do you find yourself having to speak manager or to speak to people who don't have a technical background, like you mentioned, and getting down in the weeds with the folks who have the technical background that you have to speak? How do you find? I mean, do you think a good CSO would need to be able to maybe have that kind of mixture, and what mixture do you think it should be, a 70-30 or a 50-50 kind of thing?
Sure. So I don't know that I could speak to the breakdown of soft personal skills versus technical skills, but I would say that hopefully we talked through a lot of it with the core competency review, that most of those have everything to do with communicating business language, right? So you notice we didn't walk in the door talking about even risk. We walked in the door talking about what are the requirements of our program from the business's perspective, and strategically how are we aligning with the business's objectives for the security program. And that's where it begins and ends, largely, in anybody outside of your team. Maybe if you're talking to the CIO and the CIO's team, the technical folks, maybe you can continue having technical discussions and be successful. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. But anybody outside of that silo, anybody outside of the technical silo, if you're not speaking in terms of here's what our customer cares about, here's how our security program is helping our customers, then they'll listen to you for a few minutes maybe, if you're lucky. And then after that, they may be there in the meeting, but they've tuned out. Because, it's the same thing as listening to a nerd or a geek, talk about the latest gadget that you don't care about, right? It's gobbledygook. It means nothing. What means something is, here's how our organization is trying to, again, for lack of a better word, make money, and here's how I'm going to help us make money. Right? Or at least not lose money. That's certainly what security contributes to.
Not lose more money.
Yep.
Do you know what the idea was of you going to the legal team? I've never heard of anybody in security going directly to the legal team. Is that to help to protect the company so that you can help them understand the concepts involved? Or, it kind of boggles.
I asked the same kind of question. I was curious when I came into the organization, and the simple answer is the security program was created out of an audit finding. And so when they were looking as to where to put it, the legal team had responsibility to respond to the audit and decided, nope, we want security. So, and I think that they did some. That's an oversimplification. I'm sure they did some investigation and some research in those terms. But yeah, that's basically what happened.
Yeah, usually you hear them talking. Information security reports to either finance, which is a death nail for most information security folks because the finance guy only sees numbers, or the CIO who doesn't necessarily
cares about availability, right?
Yeah, cares about availability. So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Or COO these days, or Chief Risk Officer. You certainly see those kinds of things. That happens. Even directly to the CEO, that happens as well. But I think ultimately you can be successful in any of those reporting structures with the right approach and with speaking business language. You can be successful. Now, that's not 100% of the cases 100% of the time. So be careful out there. Be careful out there.
So what do you think about organizations that are creating all these new chief risk officers, chief privacy officers, chief data officers, these roles that have been kind of tailor-made to do one specific thing and, yet are going to be having their fingers into other divisions. So you're going to have, like the Office Space thing. I have 5 different bosses, Bob. I don't know who to answer. I get 5 different emails from 5 different people if I miss a meeting. Do you see that as a useful use of manpower or time or effort?
Oh, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask. I have an opinion, as always, but...
Please, we're all about opinions here.
Right.
It's the beginning of the end for the company, I think. How TV shows, they do really well, and then they start bringing in kids and neighbors as main characters and things, or they have twins or something.
Exactly. No, I think that there's value in identifying a reporting silo that makes sense to the organization, right? So if the organization has found that it's really not getting at the highest level or at the board level, really specifically, the right information, then that's when it makes sense to carve out a new CXO, a new C-level officer. But that's only when it makes sense. And so I can't speak to nearly why these other C-level types are getting created and what it means. But, at least the data officer one, which is one of the newer ones I heard about, it sounds like it's because no offense to the CIOs out there, but the CIOs are not really cutting it in terms of really reporting on what the organization cares about. And we need now somebody in charge of data in our organization versus information, which just seems at odds or contradictory. But again, I think it's not that the organization has identified a new need. It's that the organization has not gotten the need met. So the organization had a need of X to really understand their technical infrastructure and how that facilitates or enables delivering information about their customers so that they can make good business decisions as to how to move forward and what to spend money on to make more money. and the CIO wasn't getting the information to them, and that may have been it.
Wow. Now, to be fair, I don't know where the chief data officer or chief privacy or risk officers are sitting. They may be like an EVP level kind of guy who's responding to the COO or reports to them. But I see them as kind of a knee-jerk reaction. It's like, oh no, we've got the media eye on us. We need to make it look like we're addressing the issue. And we're doing that by putting some guy who's going to make $300,000 a year to make sure that this doesn't happen again, which may be a good thing. And, it may just be quietly shoved down into the special projects role later on, once the eye is off of people, which I've seen that happen quite a bit. What's up, Mr. Betcher? You got a question?
Oh, what you mentioned, adding another chief data officer because the CIO wasn't getting something done. Instead of replacing him, you just add another guy.
Yeah, I have no idea if that's really how things are playing out. It's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Sounded like you said cheap data officer there, Mr. Betcher.
Nice. Freudian slip.
Yeah, definitely a Freudian slip. So I guess that's all we've got. So as always, Mr. Beyer, it was a pleasure, and I'm glad you could take some time out to come talk to our little podcast here. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. Absolutely, it's my pleasure. It's a great honor again to have a good conversation with you guys. I appreciate it.
All right, and you have a great day.
You guys too.